This summer, big box retailers are seeking a massive big government handout from Congress paid for by consumers. Mega retailers are trying to trick Congress into enacting harmful credit card routing legislation, falsely claiming that it will help small businesses. In reality, this big box bill would transfer billions from consumers to retailers, while eliminating popular credit card rewards programs, weakening cybersecurity protections, and reducing access to credit. So tell Congress to stop this big box bait and switch and oppose credit card routing legislation. Visit stopthebigboxbaitandswitch.com to learn more.
Every time I hear hail to the chief, I turn around and say, where is he?
The 2024 Republican presidential primary field is taking shape.
The battle lines are becoming clearer, and so is the field of candidates.
Is the odds-on favorites, if you look at the polling, still Trump versus Biden?
That seems to be it, but it's just way too early to tell.
I'm more angry now, and I'm more committed now than I ever was.
Big challenge for these candidates is going to be how do they navigate Donald Trump? And how do they navigate Ron DeSantis?
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
Boy, we are really breaking our backs here, fellas.
I mean, it's been content nonstop.
What a week.
We had that huge announcement for folks who missed out.
Yeah.
Ruthless is going to have that game day style official pregame show live at the Milwaukee debate.
It's going to be huge. I cannot wait. And there's nobody I would rather spend that day with than you fellas.
Oh, what a gentleman.
There really is no other group of people on earth that I'd rather spend my time with. And I do have one question for the old man, though. Michael, how's mom and them?
How's mom and them?
How's my mom?
Is mom happy about this?
I just texted it to him. We've had sort of a busy day. A lot of
There's
stuff.
been a lot of things happening.
Yeah, we also have day jobs, but I haven't gotten any feedback yet. I'm sure they're going to be very proud.
Well, we haven't been particularly rough on the old man lately. Other than King of the Hill.
Every single episode.
King of the Hill was a little rough.
Or going in on me with the Madrigals, or going on with Mike
you
Pence.
remember them all, don't you?
Yeah. I never forget.
And so does mom.
Yeah.
So does mom. I appreciate that. But listen, we are so excited. We cannot thank Ronna McDaniel enough, the RNC enough, for trusting us to do an unprecedented show. I mean, nobody's done this before.
Yeah.
Our understanding, we're going to be right out in front of the debate. We're very excited about it long before anything happened about us being a part of it, and want to make sure that everybody's seeing it the same way we do. Is a particularly significant moment, not only for the Republican Party and who we ultimately nominate, but for this country. Because if we're ultimately going to beat Joe Biden, it starts there.
Yep.
And a very, very special invite that I think all of us think is really amazing.
And
right?
I mean, it's going to be a huge deal. We're going to knock this out of the park.
Yeah.
They're going to have a crowd behind us. A lot of folks, if you're in the area or just want to hike out there, come on down August 23rd.
Yeah.
It's going to be incredible.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be game day style. And what that means is, it's going to be a little different than what you typically see on your network news pregame, where the panel comes on and they've got their 15 seconds to tell you who they think is going to have a real zinger tonight.
There is a reason why in almost every one of our live shows we have Ain't Sure Hank Done It This Way. This is definitely one of those we ain't sure Hank done it this way, but we're going to do it differently. It's going to be very fun. Everybody's going to be super involved. And I'm giddy. I want it to be tomorrow.
I mean, it's going to be incredible. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
And everyone tune in. You're going to see it yourself, or you're going to be there yourself. So,
super excited. So, as for today's show, we're continuing our presidential series. And remember, we are absolutely committed to interviewing every serious candidate who has their name on a ballot, who's willing to go through that process to put their name in the ballot, get in the arena, and make an argument. And I think you as a listener deserve to hear that, because we live in a selection society in terms of where you get your news, where you get your information. And the part of that selection is us. And I think you choose us in large part because we're going to go outside of the boxes that everybody lives in and give you a good understanding of who everyone is. You can love them, you can hate them.
That's the whole point, is we create a platform for conservatives that isn't a firing squad like if they try going on a mainstream, news outlet.
Yeah.
This is where they can come and they can talk to the folks directly, tell them about themselves, what they believe in, why they're running. And so far, we've had Nikki Haley.
Yep.
Vivek Ramaswamy's been on.
Yep.
Chris Christie's been on.
Yep.
Former Vice President Mike Pence has been on.
Yep. And today, we're going to have former Governor Asa Hutchinson on. And by the way, we've got a lot more scheduled here in the next few weeks. So if your favorite hasn't been covered yet, rest assured.
Yeah.
Rest assured. We will get there. In the meantime, the same sort of like not attacking, not being aggressive piece that we apply to our interviews and letting people make their case is not what we do with the rest of the show, is it, fellas?
No, not at all.
So I think a really important part of that is opening up this show with the whistleblower.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were following, and this blew me away earlier this week, so we all recall the Russiagate shit and all the nonsense where, you know, Democrats were investigating on the Hill the Russian ties to the Trump campaign to everything else. Every time there was any sort of finding by Schiff staff, it would lead the New York Times, the Washington Post, and everything else, and it would just be a part of the national conversation, trying to ruin the Trump presidency, obviously. Not the case with what has been happening with the whistleblowers that have come out to discuss the investigation into Hunter Biden. You recall a couple of weeks ago there was some kind of a settlement, basically, where they came to a plea deal where he pled guilty to some slaps on the wrist for some tax evasion shit, and like, you know, all went away. Well, immediately thereafter, you got IRS whistleblowers and then an FBI whistleblower that confirmed the IRS whistleblowers' contention that this was an investigation that wasn't what was characterized by both Merrick Garland or the U.S. attorney who are prosecuting this case. In fact, deviated sharply from that. As we're speaking right now, Chuck Grassley has added to all of this and released for the entire American public some findings that he has come to. John, you want to characterize that?
Yeah, Senator Grassley from Iowa has built quite a reputation as someone who will not be trifled with. You cannot lie to this guy and get away with it. You can't hide information from this guy because he's going to get to the bottom of everything. And today he's put out brand new information. And what he's saying is basically for years the FBI has had information from a trusted source alleging that then Vice President Joe Biden engaged in criminal bribery, a scheme with the head of Burisma, which is, of course, is the Ukrainian company that Hunter was a board member of. And so Grassley's been working very hard to reveal what the FBI has tried to keep hidden for years. And now the world can know what the FBI knew and sat on for years.
So this is from the document. This is put out by Abigail Marone, who does comms for Senator Hawley.
Yep.
It says Zlochevsky, he's the guy, the Burisma guy, made some comment that although Hunter Biden was, quote, was stupid and his dog was smarter, Zlochevsky's dog smarter than Hunter Biden, Zlochevsky needed to keep Hunter Biden on the payroll. This is straight up cash and carry government. This is influence peddling.
Yeah.
Right.
And it ties directly now to then Vice President, now President Joe Biden.
Well, I think the interesting thing here is we have both sides of it now. With Grassley's disclosure here, we have the bribery, right? And with the whistleblowers, we have Biden's political appointees and the Justice Department putting a thumb on the scale and trying to hamstring the investigation into this fact pattern after the fact when they're putting together the investigation.
Which, by the way, before you go on with that, Michael, I think an important part for our audience to understand is that these whistleblowers have absolutely no motive here.
Yeah.
All they're doing is putting their own careers.
They have everything to lose and nothing to gain.
And nothing to gain.
None.
Right?
Because no media outlet's going to give them a contributor gig.
No.
It's not like all the idiots who created stories about Russia who got gigs at MSNBC and CNN to be contributors. These guys will not get any of those contracts.
That's right.
That's right.
And they won't even, I mean, to be honest with you, they're not even covering any of this stuff. That's why we're going in detail. Like, usually we like to laugh and have a good time, but you need this information. This is stuff that you need to understand because you're not getting it anywhere else.
So Wolf, can we play clip number 2? This is IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley.
The Justice Department allowed the president's political appointees to weigh in on whether to charge the president's son. After United States Attorney for D.C., Matthew Graves, appointed by President Biden, refused to bring charges in March 2022, I watched United States Attorney Weiss tell a room full of senior FBI and IRS senior leaders on October 7, 2022, that he was not the deciding person on whether charges were filed. That was my red line.
So, again, you're talking about someone who has got nothing to gain, who's giving firsthand account of an experience that he had with the eventual prosecutor of this case, who said that it was not his decision to whether to bring charges against Hunter Biden or not. That flies in the face of what Merrick Garland has said repeatedly and specifically. Someone is lying here.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Someone's lying here. Do you think it's the guy, the IRS agent, who is just like no pattern of partisanship whatsoever, who's sitting there with his job in jeopardy? Is that the guy?
I can't remember. Is it the IRS guy or the FBI guy who's a lifelong Democrat who's even like donated?
It's the IRS whistleblower, and that's Joseph Ziegler. Also here, more supportive evidence of this in clip 7. Let's play that, Wolf.
There was an environment when we were interviewing witnesses where you were afraid to ask questions that could lead to the presidential campaign. And this is after the campaign's over. So questions like that, it was restricted, and so things like that we were limited to talking about.
Well, incredible.
I mean, guys, this is not a small deal. There have been episodes on both sides with Republicans and Democrats where you do these kind of oversight hearings that overreach, that try to make claims that aren't true, or that in the end clearly were mucked up by the fog of what was going on. You know, I think about like the Hillary Clinton embassy situation, which was chaotic, and clearly they had culpability they never actually admitted. But in the end, most Americans were like, well, this is a tragic situation. I don't know what to think, but it is what it is. This is actually the worst thing that an American government could do 100%. If it's true. What it means is that you've got an entirely political apparatus that is choosing to prosecute or not prosecute, to investigate or not investigate, based exclusively on someone's ties to a sitting president of the United States. That's Banana Republic stuff.
That's horrific. That's horrific.
It's Banana Republic stuff. And if the American people thought for a moment, which they now increasingly do, probably at least half, that you had a Justice Department and an FBI, CIA, all these things that operated in a partisan fashion, you lose the trust of the American people. When you lose the trust of the American people, democracies have a real problem.
Yeah.
They have a real problem. So, like, don't come to me with, like, oh, democracy's in peril, Donald Trump, when you're looking at stuff like this. Why isn't everyone on this, by the way?
And that is the huge part of the story that I want to know about, is the media has essentially had a blackout on all of this.
Right.
You check the front page of every major news outlet's website, not a peep about this. Not one. They're all just talking about Trump.
Yeah, and we all know that this is explosive news. And we all know the credibility that Senator Grassley carries. No media outlet questions the validity of something coming from Senator Grassley's office.
They don't.
It's as good as gold, and it has been for years.
I was just going to say it has been for 30 years.
It really has. So they don't question the validity of the information. They know that he is on it.
And they still don't care.
They just don't want to put it on the front page because it makes Democrats look bad.
Yep.
And the cultures of these newsrooms skew to the left, and it is a big, big problem.
The Democrats are doing a really bang-up job making themselves look bad, though, in all of this. There's another clip in here that we just got to play.
Yeah.
This is Democrat Representative Dan Goldman. Can you play clip 3, please, Wolf?
And you testified that he said that Hunter told his dad, according to Rob Walker, quote, "I may be trying to start a company or try to do something with these guys." Now, let me ask you something. That doesn't sound much like Joe Biden was involved in whatever Hunter Biden was doing with the CEFC if Hunter Biden is telling him that he's trying to do business with them, does it?
No, but it does show that he told his father he was trying to do business, and he was
Okay,
talking
well,
to
that
his
is
father
true. Hunter Biden
about the
does
business.
try to do business. That's correct.
Yes.
So you don't not only have no direct evidence connecting Joe Biden to any of Hunter Biden's business deal, you actually had proof that he wasn't involved. That is the proof that you had.
Oh, is it?
Is it because I think you just accidentally confirmed that Joe Biden, in fact, knew about these business deals.
Recall, during the 2020 campaign, Joe Biden was asked explicitly whether he had any knowledge. It wasn't whether he was involved in the business deals.
Never talked to my
whether
son.
he had any knowledge of the business deals that Hunter Biden was involved in. And he said, no, I've never talked to Hunter Biden about his business.
Right.
Turns out that was a lie.
The guy, well, I mean, he's like chief defender. The guy that was actually wasn't in Congress. He was actually the counsel for Shifty Schiff prosecuting the Russia hoax.
Yeah.
That guy is the guy who's come out and been like, oh, yeah, well, he did do all the, he is an abject liar.
Yeah.
Right. And the reference to Schiff is something that I think is important for us to consider here, because it shows that the barrier to entry for Republicans is so much higher than Democrats ever have. Schiff didn't have anything close to this evidence. In fact, they had
nothing.
Negative
As it turns
evidence.
out.
They
As it
had
turns out, they had
absolutely
nothing.
nothing. And they were wall-to-wall coverage of every major media outlet for years. And here we have explosive evidence from impugnable sources. And it's literally you got to go to A4. You got to go to
well, I don't
the
know. I'm
Metro
sure you can
section.
find it there. I mean, honestly, go to your computer right now, Google search what we're talking about, this hearing, IRS whistleblower. You will get Fox News, and you will get a bunch of conservative outlets. You do not get the New York Times. You do not get the Washington Post or the Associated Press. You do not get your local newspaper. You don't. None of them covered it. At all.
And I think a lot of that, and Ashbrook's touched on this before, is the changing culture that happened in these newsrooms, right? I mean, Trump, I think, really broke a lot of these people and these supposed journalists in the sense that they then saw themselves as, oh, well, if you say anything that makes a Democrat look bad, you're an enabler of fascism, right?
Right.
And so you got all these young clowns who showed up to these, like, Washington Post and New York Times newsrooms, took over the slack, and eventually just became a mob. And they'd go after any of the old school journalists who try to report anything factual if it hurt a Democrat. They'd say, wow, you're enabling fascism. And all of a sudden, that guy's out of a job.
Right. We know that these newsrooms have always leaned left. We know that the typical person who goes into journalism is like a left of center type. That's the way it's always been. This is very different.
This is different. This is unbelievable. So I want to play clip 4 here, Wolf. This is Ro Khanna, who is if there is such a thing, a relatively thoughtful Democrat who doesn't pipe off and make statements that are impossible to defend on a typical basis. And that's important context because of what he's saying here. He's not defending any of this. Go ahead and give it a play.
And I'm not questioning. I mean, you are a stickler for the law. It reminds me of Les Mis, and the famous person wanted to get the person who had a sandwich.
Oh, it's just a sandwich.
So specific.
I'm just offended he didn't know who Javert is.
That's what I'm saying.
Would you like to give us a bar or two?
No.
Come on, Michael. Look down.
No.
No.
And was it a sandwich or was it a loaf of bread that Jean Valjean took?
It was a loaf of bread.
I mean,
man, Smug, you know your stuff.
I had to read the unabridged version. It was way too long to read, but this is completely ridiculous.
But I guess the point is that Ro Khanna here is not saying you, sir, are a liar.
No.
What he's saying is everything that you're saying may very well be true.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's that big a deal.
It's incredible.
Yeah, pay-to-play scheme and corruption in the vice president's office
with
is
foreign governments.
just being a little stickler.
With foreign entity.
It's just a sandwich.
It sounds ticky-tacky. I don't know.
And again,
it's unbelievable.
his posture would be completely different if there were 36 25-year-old reporters with recorders in his face the second he walked out of his door saying, how can you say this about Hunter Biden? How can you say this about Burisma? What do you have to say about the corruption from Joe Biden?
Yeah.
Literally, his posture would be completely different if he were held accountable, just like Republicans were.
Totally. So now we got to get to the other side of the coin here, because I think Byron Donalds does. He's typically extraordinarily good at this sort of thing. We have clip 5.
Her transcript, page 17, what it says is that you were investigating a social media company, and through the process of that investigation, you found out that Hunter Biden was paying potentially 4 prostitutes in a potential prostitution ring. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Well, that kind of boils it down, doesn't it?
Geez. I don't know. It's kind of ticky-tacky.
That sounds like a ham sandwich. Just a sandwich. Oh, Javert. Oh, that stickler Javert.
I mean, this is just, it's stunning, and it's actually really sad.
Yeah.
It's sad for the country that we've arrived in a place where journalists who used to exist to, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted now exist to protect those in power. Mm-hmm. They've essentially blockaded any criticism of this administration, of Joe Biden, of this horrific situation that we find ourselves. This is straight up corruption.
Yeah. No,
this is absolute corruption. And he lied to the American people when he ran and said he had no idea about this during the campaign, when the mainstream media and big tech blockaded any information about Hunter Biden from getting out. And here we are. This is what happened, is we now have a corrupt individual in the White House. The facts are coming out, black and white. We've got the documents. We've got multiple whistleblowers. And the media won't cover it.
Well, and hats off to the media that is covering it, including Axios, which has a fond spot in our heart today, given that they broke the news on our Wisconsin trip. But they also have the guts to report some of this stuff where nobody else does. A pair of IRS whistleblowers testified in Congress that the Justice Department slow-walked its investigation into Hunter Biden and ignored recommendations to file felony tax charges, instead striking a plea deal that will allow the president's son to avoid prison time. That's the sum and substance of the whistleblower stuff. What Grassley is talking about is far beyond that. Mm-hmm. What he's talking about is the involvement of the then vice president, now president of the United States, in all of it. And in specifically the dealings with Burisma, which, as you recall, is a Ukrainian energy company that was under investigation at the time. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden famously bragged that he was not going to release any sort of aid that was authorized by Congress to Ukraine in his time as a vice president until they agreed to fire a prosecutor that just so happened to be investigating, guess which company? Burisma.
It's incredible.
Oh,
right?
Strange. A real stickler there.
He's to camera with this. This is not us like sewing stuff together to try to create a narrative. No. He's to camera on that
He was bragging about it.
Yeah. And so that's where, people, you hear Democrats being like, oh, man, Republicans are sure interested in naked photos of Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Nope. It turns out that there's a systemic corruption that is obvious with Hunter. Mm-hmm. I mean, obvious. Clearly, that guy was not qualified to have any of the jobs that he had or the tens of millions of dollars that he collected, except for his relation to his father. But if you then establish a significant link to his father in knowledge of these business dealings, and then heaven forbid you actually establish a financial link of some kind, you're dealing with something that this country has actually never experienced before.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I want to stop with that so everybody understands
it's that
the
dire
gravity that we're talking. This is not something that you're like, oh, it's another presidential scandal. Oh, even go back to like Nixon, right? When you're like, oh, Watergate. Did he know that the burglars were at DNC headquarters? Okay, let's just say all that shit is absolutely true. Now, fast forward and say that you had a vice president of the United States that actively knew that his son was collecting tens of millions of dollars for their family, and he was running interference for it.
Yeah, right. That's what this is.
To a foreign entity that does not have America's best interest at heart, regardless of what you think of like Ukraine or whatever. Their goal is Ukrainian, clearly. This guy is elected to represent the United States of America, and yet he is dealing with his son's business and controlling American policy as it relates to benefit that business. If that is true, that is the most significant allegation that's been made against a president in our lifetimes.
Yes.
And you don't need to take our word for it. You don't even need to take these whistleblowers' word for it. This brand new document that Senator Grassley has come up with from the FBI has references to recordings, at least 2 recordings from President Joe Biden and 15 recordings with Hunter Biden. So there is even more information out there than we have at this moment. And it is, I mean, I cannot stress enough how important this information is going to be to the ongoing conversation.
It doesn't seem like this is the end of it. It feels like it's just the tip of the iceberg.
I think so.
It really does, and we're going to stay on this. The reason we did this, and I know it's a little dry for a Friday for a lot of people, but you need to know it.
You have to.
Because it's not going to be in your local newspaper, and if you subscribe to the national things, you're not going to see it there either. Like, you have to actually be a political junkie to go seek it out.
Yeah.
So you're getting here on the Ruthless Friday program. We're going to stay on it. I think we'll talk to Grassley about it. I think we'll probably talk to Jamie Comer about it. What we want is facts.
Right.
And I think you all deserve that because this is an incredibly explosive story.
Right. And if you're listening to this show and you're dissatisfied with your subscription to the Washington Post or the New York Times because they're not providing you with the information that you want about your government, I encourage you to subscribe to Senator Grassley's press release list.
Yep.
Because you're going to get more from that than you will ever get from either of those newspapers.
Just read it, and boy, are they going to be happy about you suggesting that.
He doesn't charge a single thing.
Not a single dime. He's a man working for the people.
Sure is.
I love it. All right, so one story we didn't get to this week that I've wanted to every single episode is about this wild survival story. According to the New York Post, sailor and dog amazingly survive on rainwater and raw fish while adrift for 2 months. An Australian man, it's always Australia, isn't it? It always is.
What a wild
I wonder if he had
place.
a dingo.
Is this a dingo?
An Australian man has been rescued in the Pacific after surviving for 2 months on rainwater and raw fish in what has been likened to the film Castaway. But his companion was a dog, not a red handprint volleyball. Sydney resident Tim Shattuck, 51-year-old cancer survivor, and his pooch Bella set off from La Paz, Mexico in April on a catamaran journey.
That takes balls.
To French Polynesia.
Okay, that is insane.
What is this guy thinking?
From Mexico to, that's essentially Bora Bora.
Yeah.
That's off like, you're going out there.
So there was a short story. It's actually it's an American classic. It's actually, well, not American classic. It is one of the most famous short stories of all time. It's called Kon-Tiki, and it's written by a guy named Thor Heyerdahl.
Yeah.
And if you're a high school student and you took English in high school, you remember this. I know Michael does.
It's probably been banned in high schools. I'm sure it says something, and it's confrontational.
This is like a real life Kon-Tiki.
It really, it's incredible. Their vessel was damaged in a storm. I mean, who'd have guessed that you'd encounter some kind of weather
over the Pacific? This is insane.
The pair survived by drinking rainwater and eating raw fish as they waited for a miracle adrift in the Pacific. On Wednesday, a helicopter conducting surveillance for a tuna trawler spotted the tiny catamaran bobbing in the middle of the vast ocean. "Can I get your name, please?" a rescuer asked him in a video of the rescue. The Telegraph reported, "I'm Tim Sherrick. I'm from Australia," he replies. Sherrick and Bella were taken aboard the trawler and appeared to be in remarkably good shape given what they had endured. "I've been through," this is a quote from him, "I've been through a very difficult ordeal at sea."
God love
what
that
a classic.
description.
"How are you doing, sir?" "Well, I have been at a difficult ordeal. It is one of the things that I'll remember for a great time."
I mean, I have to say, this dude is pretty hard. Like, that is
very
bonkers.
Very hard.
Beyond just like, the fortitude required to put up with 2 months in the Pacific, rainwater, raw fish. I think the mental part is what would get to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
Well, he had his dog. That's probably why he didn't eat the dog, right?
Well, I mean, like, after a week of staring at this dog, I'm like, I guess it's just not going to end, dude. Like,
the dog's like, dude, what's up?
I'd be like, this is your fault, dog. Like, I lose it, dude. I would 100% go crazy. 1 week in the Pacific, sun beating down on you. You're drinking.
Dude, his skin must be leather.
Yeah.
Absolute leather.
Absolute.
Like, how do you get out of the elements? I guess maybe he just, get in the water, right?
I mean, maybe
So
they had a
feel
cabin
bit.
or something. I don't know.
I guess maybe. Yeah, I guess he probably had a cabin. It's wild that he didn't eat the dog.
It's a catamaran. There's not really, much space.
Yeah.
Listen to the rest of the quote. I'm just needing some rest and good food because I've been alone at sea for a long time.
This is the hardest dude.
I'm in very good health.
Well, it says he beat cancer. So what's the Pacific Ocean?
He kicked the shit out of cancer. Like,
Yeah.
But like, it's one thing. It's one thing to catch some fish and survive. Dude caught enough fish to keep the dog alive too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild.
and then rainwatered it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he encountered some weather.
Yeah.
So he just had the wherewithal to get a couple of coffee cans out and fill that sucker up, huh?
Man.
Holy smokes. Really, they called it a needle in a haystack scenario. But, I mean, I'll be honest. I think your take's the right one, Smug. I'm not sure that can do that.
Like 2 months, within 2 weeks, I'd lose my mind. 100%. Within 2 weeks, I lose my mind. Like, it's all over. No one's going to find me. I'm going crazy. This is your fault, dog. I'd kill the dog.
You'd be talking to yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you'd start hallucinating. You're out there in the beating sun all day. You're eating raw fish, hoping it rains so that you can have a miserable time getting thrown around, start puking, just so you can get some rainwater. That's no way to live. After 2 weeks, I'd be like, I've had enough. Tapping out.
He just does a sailor's dive off the front.
Just
see a dog.
Just
good luck.
See you in hell, dog. See you.
Good luck to you.
Just jump in the water and breathe as deeply as you can.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible story. All right, so it's a big movie weekend, fellas. We've been talking about one of these for sure. But you've got Barbie and Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Which you've got a bunch of dorks out there talking about Barbieheimer. Which, let me just start with that. The reason it's bled into our world, I mean, we've been following this clearly, because Oppenheimer, I think I'm actually anxious to see.
100%, dude.
But this has bled into our political world a little bit, because you've got these dork Democratic senators who are posting pictures of themselves where they say, like, Barbieheimer.
Yeah.
And then there's, like, a picture of them in pink and a picture of them in black and white.
It's too much.
Like, what are they doing?
And to be clear, it's not the actual elected official, because, like, especially in the case of, like, Ben Cardin, this is someone who is essentially a fossil, doesn't know where they are. It's their, like, lame as hell staffer who's like, wow, my life and job suck. Maybe I'll create a personality for this, like, senator I work for.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I have none of my own.
Senator, I don't care that you've been working on serious pensions legislation for your entire career. I'm going to put you in pink and throw you on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. Like the guy. This is great. This is from Joe Simonson, who's over at the Free Beacon. Great guy, great follow on Twitter. He says, very weird recent phenomenon where Dem staffers who work for old/lame white guys, not cool, take over their social media accounts and just create this completely detached persona so they can presumably self-justify why they work for old, lame Democrats. Just destroyed them.
It's so good.
It is just amazing.
It's amazing. You see it all the time, and they do it with the lyrics from Taylor Swift too. You know,
Yeah,
it's like, dude, they don't listen to. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, Bob Casey announced his re-election in Pennsylvania with a Taylor Swift song.
Yeah, it's the most corny, fake ass shit you could possibly do.
It is cringe to say the least. But I mean, you guys you see this?
I'm 100% seeing Oppenheimer. You know, Friday when everyone is seeing this. I'm actually for content for the program. Me and Foldy are flying out to Los Angeles. When we get all that packaged, everyone who follows our YouTube, you're going to see that. It's going to be amazing. But the first thing we're doing when we land is seeing Oppenheimer in 70mm.
Oh, you're going to go to the full IMAX.
Yeah, there's only like a dozen theaters in the country showing this film in 70mm IMAX. And like what's being said is when the bomb goes off, it's supposed to be like a visceral feeling.
Well, I saw an interview with the producer who was like, I wanted it to be painful.
Yeah.
Like his whole thing was like, no, we're not going to do AI. I want people to be in pain for this.
And we got Foley a seat in the exact very front row. So it may kill him.
Good.
And if it does, he'll have died for a good reason.
Yeah. Can we get, I want a full report.
Oh, 100%. 100% when I get back.
And if we can see his precious face, because he's a sensitive soul.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if he survives the bomb sequence, definitely we'll get in his full report.
I actually, devil's advocate here, I actually get the Barbieheimer thing a little. Because I think, women are really excited to see the Barbie movie. Mm-hmm. And dudes are just really interested to see Oppenheimer. And so maybe it's part of a negotiation, right?
Oh, it's like you take one, we'll take another, we'll go back-to-back matinee.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Or I was thinking the smart play would be like try to find same showtime. They're both right around 2 hours.
And just
watch
up.
by yourself.
Just split up.
Up to Barbie you go, and I'm just drinking beers watching news.
Can you imagine? I hesitate to say this publicly, but can you imagine watching a movie by yourself? Oh, glorious.
It's the best. Like
3 hours by yourself, no kids.
And there's no kids watching Oppenheimer. They are not interested in the Manhattan Project.
My oldest daughter has taken a real interest in American history in the last year, and she's interested.
Is she?
Yeah, she's very interested.
Talk about raised right.
Yeah,
so you're going to take her?
Well, I'm going to wait till the movie comes out and read the Common Sense Media rundown.
You want to make sure there's nothing in there that's going to scar her for life.
There's supposedly some stuff
to my friends.
That's not family friendly.
Yeah, so we might wait till it comes out to TV.
Responsible parenting here, a sensitive relationship approach.
Yeah,
I mean, look at the Ruthless Friday program. You think we're tough? We're
thoughtful. Yeah,
thoughtful family men.
I love good Dad Ashbrook segments.
Those
are really nice. It's a great way to start the week.
It comes out once a month. No, maybe once a quarter. It's great. I love it. All right, so we got to get to this interview. It's part of our presidential presentation, and here we go.
This episode is fueled by the American Petroleum Institute. No matter your politics, no matter the debate, one thing is certain. America runs on affordable, reliable energy. America's policies must recognize that Americans benefit from making, moving, and improving the energy right here in America. Today, America's oil and natural gas industry supports nearly 11 million jobs and provides American energy to keep this nation strong. Learn how at api.org.
Well, here we are again at the Ruthless Presidential Showcase, fueled by America's oil and natural gas. You can learn more about all of that at api.org. And this day, we've got a very important guy, former governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson. Welcome to the program.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've been doing a lot of traveling. We've been reading a lot about it. You had a pretty wild weekend last weekend. We'll get into all of that. But I think where we want to start is have people get to know you a little bit. You grew up in Arkansas politics back sort of when the Clintons were running things down there, and that has to be an interesting perspective on where things are today.
I started in Arkansas politics when we were a red dot. The Republican Party is a red dot in a blue ocean. I was told as a young lawyer that if you want to have a future, you better be a Democrat if you want to be a prosecutor or a judge. Of course, that was when Reagan was advertising or marketing his conservatism. I identified with that, limited role of government, opportunity, responsibility. So, I ditched the Republican Party, Republican, and it's been an uphill slog. I was a county chairman in Benton County, Bentonville, when Ronald Reagan got elected. And then I was a state party chairman of the Republican Party when Bill Clinton was governor and when he was running for president. So
you got to have some great Clinton stories, don't you?
Oh, everybody in Arkansas has Clinton stories, and of course, he has his library there. We get along well, but we've been constructive adversaries from the time that I was in Congress, state party chairman, and of course, then even the administration. I mean, he was president while I was in Congress.
Yeah,
and you were a House manager on the impeachment proceedings in '98. Is that right?
Oh, I was indeed. It was one of the most unusual times. Now you've gone through 3 impeachments, and at the time that we did the articles of impeachment during the Clinton administration, is the first time it had done in 100 years. So it was unusual, and it was dramatic. And of course, with Bill Clinton being from my home state, it was even more controversial. It was very unusual whenever I'm presenting the obstruction of justice case in the Senate, and President Clinton decides it's a good time to give his State of the Union address. And of course, it's tradition that the members of Congress from the president's home states escorts him into the chambers. So I had to leave the Senate chambers prosecuting the president, go back and escort him into the chambers on the outside.
It's like a perp walk.
But I mean, it must have been wild. Somebody you'd known for years from the other side as party chairman and everything else, like you just said, to go back and to not only be the House manager, escort him into the. Did you guys talk much at that time?
Well, not much.
A lot of friendly commentary, I imagine.
Yeah, it was that day that he actually hired Dale Bumpers, a former U.S. Senator, as his legal counsel. And so I thought, well, at least I'll make it a little bit lighthearted. So I saw him and I said, well, I'm glad you finally got a decent lawyer to represent you. But, Bill...
Did he even crack a smile at that?
Oh, he did.
Okay.
And he's always, I mean, whenever my brother... Tim got elected to the Senate, and I got elected to the House at the same time. First time in the history of our country that two brothers got elected simultaneously. And anyway, so my mom was alive then and went to the White House, and Clinton heard that the Hutchinsons are out there, and he entertained and tried to win over my mom.
Did he really?
Oh, yeah. And so my mom was 80-something, and she's looking at his curio cabinet with all of his political buttons in it, and she peers in there and goes, well, Mr. President, I don't see any Hutchinson buttons in there.
Oh, nice.
You love a mom.
Yeah, you got to love a mom's doing that. Because, I mean, look, he used to sort of handpick opponents for you, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. Whenever I ran for governor, of course, he was out campaigning for my Democrat opponent. And it was after that I said, now that I won this race, I called him up, had a good visit with him, and we've done some things constructively together. But whenever I was in law school, he was a professor. Now, I didn't have him for a class, but he was a professor.
I can't even imagine
at
what
the
it'd be
University of Arkansas Law School at the time he ran for Congress against John Paul Hammersmith. So that was years ago, but Arkansas is a small state.
Yeah, right.
We all know each other, and so be warned.
Yeah, you got to watch your tongue around there, right? Politics has changed, though. I mean, look, let's get into the presidential for a minute. This is obviously why you're here. You've been traveling everywhere. I think from all accounts, not only are you a thoughtful guy, a good governor, you've got a good political radar. You obviously are aware of where the primary electorate is at this point, right? The sort of good guy, thoughtful, can get along with somebody like Bill Clinton is not exactly the top of mind for most primary voters. Yet, finishing your term as governor, you decide this is what you want to do. You want to get into this. Why?
Well, what compels me is the wrong policies of Joe Biden, taking our country in the wrong direction from energy policy, spending too much at the federal level, weak in terms of his leadership for America abroad, weak border security. So it's all about wrong policies for President Biden, but it's also reflective of the need for a course correction within the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe in that being a public servant is a defining moment for someone's life that you say, I want to give back to a country. And so much in our politics today is about divisiveness. It's about self-serving interest. And that's not my view of the public arena. So that's what motivates me to run. And your assessment is not wrong. And you're right. I am aware, the base is different than it was 20 years ago. Whenever I built the Republican Party, I was considered an arch conservative in Arkansas, and my politics has not changed. But today, the thoughtfulness, and the answers that you give that to very complex questions, sometimes they want to just hear things like build a wall, or they want to hear things like lock her up. I mean, these are things that are catchy, but that's not me. I believe in things that make a difference, and that's what governors do. You're held accountable, and you got to accomplish things. And you're not relying upon the one-liners that stir everybody's emotions.
What's your assessment on how we got here as a primary electorate? You mentioned you were an arch conservative, thought of both in the House and as governor, and now people are like, oh, that's centrist Asa Hutchinson. What happened over the last 20 years that have brought us sort of to the place that we're at from a primary electorate standpoint?
The answer is Donald Trump. I mean, you just look at his campaign and the dramatic change that it took place and caused to take place in the Republican Party. That is where we switched from a populist party based upon Republican principles to, fighting for purism, ideologically, and that if you don't agree with me 100% of the time, you're the enemy. And so, I do hearken back to the words of Ronald Reagan that if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're an ally, you're not an enemy. And that's one of the things I wanted to tell Turning Point yesterday, that we've got to respect the diversity of thought even within the Republican Party. I remember a Republican Party where Kay Bailey Hutchison was United States Senator from Texas. She was pro-choice. But she found a home in the Republican Party, and we recognized that was not exactly what, I believe, but, we respect differences, and now we have, and pro-life is something I fight hard for every day, but in the diversity of issues out there, we've become more narrow and more exclusive, and that's not how you win in general elections. You got to get those independent voters in, and to do that, it's not sloganism, but it's actually listening and understanding the needs of that suburban voter, the independent voter, and that we've got to be open to answering their challenges in life that they're most concerned about versus what happened in 2020 or the latest grievance.
So you did the Tucker interview at the forum, the Blaze Forum in Iowa last weekend, and then you did the Turning Point USA conference.
I'll give you credit for going into the belly of the beast with your message, going into places we're going to disagree with you.
And that's important. I'll go on The View. I go to an audience, and as long as they give me a chance to defend my position, I want that audience. That's how you win votes and minds. And also, I go to Trump audiences. I love going down to the Georgia State Republican Convention where Trump spoke, I spoke, but of course Governor Kemp and others wouldn't even go there because the audience was so in for Trump. So I spoke, and at the end of it, this guy came up with a Trump hat on, and he says, "You didn't completely persuade me, but I do like you now."
Okay, so that's why you do it. Because my real question was like, gosh, you got to have a thick skin to do that. Because, at the Turning Point thing, people are booing you, even though you sound pretty reasonable and obviously a nice guy, right? But like, this moment we're in is so divisive. How do you handle the criticism, whether it's, combative interview with Tucker or people at a convention who aren't liking what you're saying? Like, how do you deal with that, as a candidate and a person?
Well, you have to have a thick skin, of course, but you focus on changing hearts and minds. And just like Turning Point yesterday, yes, there were boos out there, but you know what was frustrating to me, but also exciting, is that those boos were not coming from the college-age kids that were there.
Yeah.
They were well-behaved.
We noticed.
It was the general admission folks, the adults that were in there were setting a bad example. And so give those college kids credit. And I love taking pictures with them afterwards. But that's where you influence the minds of the future. So you take it, you absorb it. You worry about your family and how they respond because they love their dad. I've got 4 children. They're grown, and 7 grandchildren. And
it's probably not their favorite thing in the world to watch you get booed on stage, right?
I'm sure it's painful for them. And that's what bothers you. I can handle it, but that is concerning. And we lose our humanity sometimes because of the anonymity of internet, Twitter and all the social media accounts. You could just say what you want to say, and you feel like you got free shot, forgetting that, hey, there's real people out there.
Yeah.
But that's good. It's politics, free speech.
It sounds like an awful lot of your message, if you're distilling this down, is that you have some concern about whether the Republican Party, as it's reflected in a primary electorate, can compete nationally in a general electorate. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we've got to change how we compete and who we nominate. 2020, we didn't nominate all the right candidates. They were looking back. They were fighting each other. They were, handpicked by Donald Trump and endorsed by him, and the voters rejected them. And so, and they couldn't win in a general election is the point. And so we've got to have candidates that meet needs, that can give confidence and can broaden our base versus narrow our base. And that's fundamental to the Republican Party. I make the case that, we have to be a party that can actually compete on the East and West Coast. I mean, I'm from Middle America. I'm from Arkansas. I love our values. I love the Mid-American values in Iowa. But we've also got to be able to win votes in the nationally. We are a national party. We're not a middle of the country party, and we've got to be able to broaden that message, particularly in the general election.
So, in your assessment, if we just redo this thing again, Donald Trump is the nominee, we're going to come up short.
Yep, no doubt.
No doubt about
it. I mean, and I think there's a growing awareness out there, and that's why I'll go to any audience because when they realize that Trump can't carry the day to win in 2024, they're going to be looking for another candidate, and I want them to know my heart. I want them to know my love of this country and also vision for where we need to go. And so that's why we got to be out there. And Donald Trump, I was chairman of his campaign in the 2020 cycle in Arkansas. So, I mean, I've supported him, but obviously he's changed. The needs of our party have changed. We can't lose again. And that's where we'd be headed if he's the nominee.
So much of this, it seems to me, and you mentioned the ideological component, which we can get to in a second, but so much of this, it seems to me, is tone, right? And you hear primary voters, they want to assure that candidates that they are voting for are as angry as they are about the direction of the country. Again, you said that's not your style. Your style is to try to persuade as many people to your point of view. And oftentimes, at least observing the way that your candidacy has been rolled out here over the last couple months, is it also attributes different rationale for policy decisions that you make. You had a big back and forth with Tucker Carlson on what the left calls gender-affirming care, and your work a veto of a bill that would have banned all of that for minors. But then you look at your record, and you're also, I think, the second governor in America who signed a ban on transgender sports, right? So there's nuance there that is sort of lost.
Well, it is, and I hope people see that I'm an independent thinker. I looked at that transgender bill. If it would have been prohibiting transgender surgery, I would have signed it in a minute, but it was too long, interfere with parental rights, and it was held unconstitutional. So, the courts, I think, gave her actually a good reason that law was bad. Now, there's been better laws that have been drafted, and there's a lot of nuances there. But yes, you look at my record, it's very a consistent conservative. We've lowered taxes. We have created $2 billion surplus, created 100,000 jobs while I was governor in Arkansas. I pushed back on the Biden administration, the Obama administration, their leftist policies. And we had a very pro-freedom way to handle the pandemic. But what you said is right. It's about tone. Whenever, I talk about a general election and winning voters, I mean, I have a conservative record, but the tone is important, that you listen. And if I can just tell you one example as to how I governed. After the George Floyd murder and the protest across the country, many of which turned violent, Little Rock was no exception. And I was watching on TV just like everybody else, and we had violent protesters that burned buildings, threatened the Capitol, hurt people, and the local police was not doing enough. I said, enough is enough. And so I brought in the National Guard, the state police, set up a unified command structure. That night we arrested 70 people, and guess what? The violence stopped.
It stopped.
It stopped.
Yeah.
But the second point of it is I brought in the young African-American protest leaders into my office. And I said, tell me what you're thinking. And they told me their concerns. And I said, well, do you want to get something done? You're concerned about police action. And so would you serve on a task force? I put them on a task force with law enforcement officers. They made recommendations, and the legislature adopted it that improved the pay of law enforcement, improved training, created a database for those that use excessive force. Something got done. That's my leadership style, is conservative, enforce the law, but let's listen, let's figure out how we can decrease the divide in our country.
What do you say to all those on the right that see what the left is doing across this country, whether it is Soros prosecutors or, you mentioned the riots and how you handled that is admirable. But there are so many people who believe that they're just not dealing in good faith at all. These are people who actually just see America as a force for bad rather than a force for good. And just simply talking about these things over time reduces conservatives to basically not making any inroads into trying to protect the values of our country. We're just constantly giving them away to the left. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that is the case on a range of issues. But how does just sort of dealing with the left get us to where we need to be rather than just fighting back?
Well, we should fight back. And if you look at my history, I've been involved in the fight for our culture for decades. I mean, I was part of the moral majority.
Yeah, right.
I was fighting the battle in Arkansas for pro-life and for, parents back in the 80s. And so it is important.
So there's no lack of conviction to fight it. It's just how you get to a solution that you're...
Exactly. And so the first level in which you impact the culture and protect the culture that you believe in is through your faith, your individual life, your community, your local school board. That's how conservatives believe we impact our future and hold our culture in a way that is consistent with our values. Now, the left then wants to use the power of government, though, to enforce theirs. And we got to oppose that in every direction, in every way. But I don't think we should be forced to say, all right, we're going to fight back by using the power of government to tell businesses what to do or to tell parents what to do. We have to at least debate when we use that power of government. To me, that is the conservative position. So as president, you're going to see me reverse Biden's policies that has pushed us left. That was flat wrong by the Biden administration. And we're going to become neutral again. We're not going to reverse that and say, all of a sudden we're going to be passing federal laws that's going to tell a local school board what your culture ought to be. That's going to be determined in your community.
No, look, it makes a lot of sense. So you would subscribe. It sounds like you're basically describing traditional Reagan conservatism, three-legged stool, right? A strong national defense, social conservatism, fiscal conservatism, across the board.
We need them all. They're a part of our conservative base, and the social conservatives is critically important, as well as the economic conservatives and our defense conservatives. And we fight amongst ourselves. Right now, there's a big debate about Ukraine.
Right.
I've never seen such division in a Republican Party on that point.
Yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, I make of it that Donald Trump has got a big megaphone, and that's influenced people's thinkings, as well as Tucker Carlson and others that have denigrated any support for Ukraine and pulled us back into an isolationist view of the world. And that's not Ronald Reagan. That's not peace through strength. And I fundamentally believe that we want peace in this world. And if you want to avoid war, let's be strong and show our strength. And and that's important in Ukraine. Not our personnel, but our dollars that can support their freedom. They have their freedom violated, and they have their sovereignty violated. When is the United States of America is not standing with the oppressed against the oppressor? That's the America that I know. That's our national character.
I think what the Tucker Carlsons of the world would say, none of this would really surprise you, but they would say they set up this as sort of a choice, right? Like, okay, but we can give billions to Ukraine, but our southern border is open, right? Or our cities are crumbling here at home, but we're giving billions to Ukraine. How do you answer to that?
Well, it is the false choice, obviously, but I answer it that, you know what our last spending bill was from Congress that we're spending domestically? $1.2 trillion. $1.2 trillion. The complaint is we're spending too much domestically. Now, obviously, we want to reallocate that to our southern border and meet some security needs that we have. But in contrast to $1.2 trillion, we're spending less than $100 billion on military aid to Ukraine. The contrasts are not there.
Right.
And so it is in our national interest. That's where Tucker and I agree. We should not engage overseas unless our national security interests are at stake. And that's
but you believe they fundamentally are here.
Absolutely. They fundamentally are. If you want to keep our men and women out of conflict, well, let's help Ukraine win their battle there in protecting their freedom and their sovereignty. Otherwise, it's going to be, we're going to have Article 5 of NATO triggered that's going to compel our men and women to engage in Europe again. We don't want to do that. And, there's limits. Absolutely. I mean, nobody gets a blank check. But whenever we have sacrificed, and my dad in World War II, now he was in a different theater, but, the greatest generation had a conflict in Europe, and we won that, and we rebuilt Europe, and we don't want to lose that freedom of our Western allies because it's part and parcel to the strength, to the future of the United States and our own freedoms.
So fast forwarding just a little bit, January 2025, you're sworn in as President of the United States. What is the first thing that you tackle? Is it the border? Is it something related to the economy? What's the first thing on your plate as you see it?
Well, first of all, you got to reverse a lot of what Joseph Biden has done through his executive order. So you're going to sign an executive order to reverse his executive orders. But
you're going to have a big stack of them too, I'm afraid.
Exactly. But then secondly, it is the border security because that builds confidence. And, right now Biden has given a directive that you can't build any more of the wall. And so you've got millions of dollars of material that's sitting there, steel, unused along the fence. Well, you got to reverse that. You got to get that infrastructure built again. I'd submit to Congress a border security bill that would help us fund our security. But there's some really good ideas out there as well, because I believe in immigration. And how about a state-based visa program? Right now, talk about the principles of federalism. Right now, we have employer-based visas. The federal government has allocated some visa authority to employers to be engaged in that. What if we had a state-based visa program in which a state could say, I want to sign up, we have needs for some workers here, and they can sponsor and they can have the security measures in place. And so that's a way to encourage the right level of lawful immigration with controls on it and honoring our principles of federalism at the same time. So those are some ideas that, I'd be looking at in January of next year. But it's all about the economy. The economy is the number one issue for 2024, and that's the first thing that I would address as president. And the most important thing is I would sign an executive order. I would send the signal as loud as I could. We're going to have a pro-growth energy policy. We're going to produce energy again. We're not going to be dependent, and it's going to be so strong that our producers are willing to invest again in our own production.
No, I think, look, well said. There's an issue out there that sort of fuses all of this: national security, economy, energy. It's the issue of China. Curious about your thoughts on what a Hutchinson administration would do to address our relationship there.
I've been to China 5 times. I understand I understand what communism means to them. And whenever I'm in a meeting negotiating with another company, a Chinese company, and they call a break, and they say, we got to call Beijing. In other words, they could not even negotiate a deal without the Central Party approving that. And so China, we're going to win economically because oppression never wins over freedom, because we have a rule of law, then they have a weak rule of law in that country. And so they're always going to be stymied in that. We have got to move our manufacturing back to the United States in terms of our sensitive industries, our pharmaceuticals, our military parts. Those have to be brought back here. We're not going to break off the economy, as some candidates say. We ought to just, freeze it and do away with our trading relationships with them. No one would follow that leadership. So we've got to compete economically with them. We've got to move some of the supply chain back. And then thirdly, we've got to make sure they understand our military strength and our commitment to the freedom of Taiwan. And that starts with having our right resources in the Philippine bases that's close in that area.
Now, look, you've thought about it. That's more than most.
That's what I do.
All right, so let's just talk brass tacks of the campaign here. Are you going to be on that debate stage in August?
It all depends on whether I won votes by this podcast right here.
Yeah, this is it. Huh? It's on us.
It's on you. I'm either sinking or swimming here. I've got to have 40,000 donors.
Yeah.
We're hundreds and hundreds of new donors every day, which is pretty remarkable. But that bar is pretty high. Other candidates have made it. We're gonna get there. ASA2024.com.
There it is.
Dollar counts and help us to get that debate stage. We've met the polling goals. I mean, the polling guidelines, we're in on that. So we just got to make sure we've got that number of donors.
So you've been critical of the RNC's debate threshold, qualifications. I'm curious why.
Well, because they're more stringent than we've ever had before, or either party's ever had before. It's intentionally designed to reduce the field more quickly, and that deprives Iowa and voters of the ability to see all the candidates. And so you've got to tighten it at some point.
Yeah.
But whenever you're looking at the first debate, let's have a broad field. And specifically, historically, if you set any criteria, there are alternatives. You either have 40,000 donors or 1% of the national polls. Well, they just combined it and said you got to have both.
Well, so I look at the Q2 numbers. A lot of people raised a lot of money and everything. But then you look at Biden. He raised $71 million, right? And I think Biden and Trump in 2020 both raised and spent $1 billion.
Yeah,
$1 billion. And a lot of that was raised online, right? And so, I guess. You've been in this business for a very long time. How do you adapt to an environment where you have to find a way to raise money
table
online?
Stakes.
And that's sort of table stakes of politics today, because if you can't, then you really can't compete nationally. So how do you sort of adjust to that?
You do it.
Yeah.
That's the criteria. You've got to match it. And so, you have to spend money to get to a $40,000 donor base.
Right.
And so basically, the campaigns are saying that's the most important criteria and element to show your strength is to have 40,000 donors. Which formula you got to spend about $1.2 million to do that.
But you're proving things like emails and text messages, things like that. It's obviously different than some previous campaigns you've probably run.
Sure, you can't rely upon just simply large donors to fund it. You've got to generate the digital advertising. You've got to go for the small dollar donors, and usually that takes a lot of investment of money. So we're doing the digital advertising. We're increasing that. We're not self-funded, so I don't have $10 million to soak into
you can't send out gift cards.
That all costs money.
No, I get it. Listen, we have 3 questions that we ask everybody on this program for the first time. The first one is, if you could plan your last meal on Earth, what would it be?
Man, you get me hungry just talking about that.
Yeah.
So it would be venison meatloaf.
Oh,
wow.
It would be fried okra and potatoes.
Yeah, that's some Southern order right there.
It would be corn on the cob and coleslaw with a sweet twist to it. That's my last meal.
I love that. And I imagine, based upon you brought us some bourbon here today, I imagine we probably throw one of those in too, huh?
Well, if it's my last one, I need a double shot.
I love it. All right. So if you never got into this line of work at all, no public service, blue sky with the benefit of retrospect, you can do anything in your life you know, now looking back, would have interest in doing, what would it be?
Exactly what I did whenever I was in the public arena, which is a lawyer.
Yeah.
So I'm a lawyer. I've tried, I love the criminal justice system. I've prosecuted cases.
Yeah, you were a U.S. attorney at one point.
I was a United States attorney, but I've been into scores and scores and scores of jury trials, espionage cases.
Did you ever pull the "I'm just a country lawyer" bit?
Oh, every day.
Yeah.
Of course, they could look at me and figure it out. I didn't have to exactly say that. I was actually accused of that during the impeachment trial as well. But I love trying cases, so that's what I would do if I wasn't in the public arena.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Can I just throw in one more question here before you get to the last one? This is a question that's become popular on the show, and a lot of people have answered it in a variety of ways. But thinking about the biggest animal that you could take mano a mano. I don't know if that's something that's crossed your mind recently.
Well, the animals are attacking us everywhere, so it's on everybody's top of
They are.
Wow.
So, Governor, I just got to ask you, thinking through, what would you say is the biggest animal you could take man on man?
An elk.
An elk. Okay.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Well,
that is a big animal.
Oh, you said that's without a weapon.
Yeah.
All right, let me pull that back.
That would be a tough deal.
Yeah.
You can't catch a hoof from an elk. You got a real problem.
Yeah. Well, I would say a coyote.
Okay.
A coyote, I'd take mano a mano. And I'd probably lose.
Just depends if you landed that first shot or not, right? All right, so the last question that we ask everybody, a little esoteric, but we feel like almost every successful person is motivated by one of two things, the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. It's not that anyone enjoys losing or people don't enjoy winning. It's what motivates you to get to the next goal, right? And you can think of it like a Michael Jordan character as an ultimate agony of defeat. And glass half full, sunny optimist charging up the hill is sort of your thrill of victory component. Governor, where do you find yourself here?
Without any doubt, thrill of victory.
Yeah.
And obviously, because part of the thrill of victory is, hey, I actually get to do something now to accomplish what you've been preaching or advocating for. So thrill of victory is always inspiring me, and there's nothing more empowering than being elected by the people you represent. Some people think that's narrowing, it's constrictive, you have to worry about it every day. It's empowering, and having that confidence in what you can do as governor or as president.
Well, thank you for joining us. Where can people follow along? You gave your website once. You can go ahead and give it another plug.
Well, thank you. It's asa2024.com. Follow us. Whether we're Iowa, South Carolina, you can see that. You can contribute to us. But follow our campaign. We need your help.
Governor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This episode is fueled by the American Petroleum Institute. No matter your politics, no matter the debate, one thing is certain. America runs on affordable, reliable energy. America's policies must recognize that Americans benefit from making, moving, and improving the energy right here in America. Today, America's oil and natural gas industry supports nearly 11 million jobs and provides American energy to keep this nation strong. Learn how at api.org.
Very, very interesting figure in Republican politics, and
And the history is interesting too, right? I mean, look, polls would suggest it's not exactly catching on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of questions about whether he can make it to a debate stage. I don't know the answers to any of that. But the guy he prosecuted the Clinton impeachment.
Mm-hmm.
He's a 2-term conservative governor. He's seen a lot of things in Republican politics over the years. And there are candidates who are like clown candidates, and there are candidates who have a significant amount of experience to bring to the table, and I certainly feel like he falls in that latter category.
And I think it's important to say we'd been contacted by their campaign a while ago to have him on the show, and I'd initially weighed in and said absolutely not, because I disagree with him on a number of issues. And I thought about it for a while, and I thought that is so incredibly unfair to our audience.
Totally.
For me to do that, to place what I believe over... This guy's a former governor. He's a serious candidate. He's not just some wahoo.
Nope.
Over him being able to... The purpose of our show, every conservative gets a fair shake.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here, right? So, look, I think everybody gets all bent out of shape when they don't hear exactly what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
You get like the Twitter traffic and all that stuff. But if you can't appreciate somebody who shares, 85% of your ideology, who's put their name on a ballot and is willing to take the risk to do it, then you got to do some introspection on that, because what you're limiting yourself to is narcissism, right? You're dealing with people who just are just going to reflect back whatever it is that you want to hear. And that's not what this dude's doing by any stretch of the imagination. I think it takes some courage. Now, whether it's your cup of tea or not, I think you got to hear stuff like this to understand why he's doing what he's doing.
And the only way you know is because he was a guest on the Ruthless Variety program.
Exactly. I love it. Fellas, I think we did it. What a week.
Yeah, heck of a week. Outstanding work. All of you gentlemen. Thanks so much, ASA Hutchinson, for being on the show. And we got a big week coming up, too. So until...
bigger and bigger.
Bigger and bigger. Growing and growing. So until next time, minions, keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs. We'll see you on Tuesday. Stay ruthless.